Amira had always been described as a little blum, a word she made up when she was 16, somewhere between plump and blooming, software, curvy, the kind of body that didn't slip easily into Korean clothing racks or fit the idle mold that dominated beauty standards here. But she never hated her body. Not exactly. She just never quite knew how to love it either. By now, Amira spoke Korean fluently enough to translate for corporate meetings, understand sarcasm, and curse in 3 dialects. She had immersed herself fully in Korean culture over the last few years. And yet, the stares hadn't stopped. Neither had the small comments. "You're pretty for a foreigner. If you lost a little weight, you'd be even more beautiful. Your face is really unique." She smiled through it all, nodded, shrunk a little smaller every time, until shrinking became second nature. In private, though, when she was with friends or alone in her little apartment, Amira came alive, funny, dramatic, occasionally sarcastic with a love for cheesy romance dramas and old-school R&B. But around strangers, especially tall, intimidating Korean CEOs with sharp cheekbones and colder eyes, she folded in on herself like paper. "Men like him don't even see girls like me," she once whispered to a friend, watching Ha-joon Park walk past on a company retreat. And if they do, it's never the kind of seeing that counts. They called him the Ice Air, CEO of Hansong Group, stoic, sharp, impossibly handsome in a way that made people nervous. Ha-joon walked like the world belonged to him and spoke like emotions were foreign currency, valuable, but only traded under the table. No one could remember the last time they saw him smile. Not truly. Born into wealth, raised with purpose, Ha-joon had never been allowed the luxury of softness. Every word he spoke was calculated, every relationship vetted, every move watched. He was due to be engaged within the week to a woman he barely knew, a business arrangement disguised as a love story. He didn't mind, or at least he hadn't. The idea of marrying her didn't anger him. It just didn't make him feel anything. "Feelings are for people who can afford to fall apart," he told his assistant once. "I run a company, not a fairy tale." He didn't know it yet, but Ha-joon was quietly starving. Not for money, not even for freedom, for connection, for the kind of quiet understanding that didn't come with contracts or last names. And when a quiet, thoughtful translator stepped onto his private jet by mistake, nervous, soft-spoken, and holding herself like she didn't deserve the space she took up, he looked up for just a second too long. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, voice flat. "I can leave," she started. "Too late. We're in the air." A beat of silence. He looked at her again. "Sit wherever you want." The airport staff spoke too fast for Amira to ask questions, and before she knew it, she was being ushered across a sleek, polished tarmac toward a private jet gleaming under the afternoon sun. "Wait, this is the flight?" she asked, eyebrows scrunched. The assistant barely looked up. "Yes, Miss Jones. Executive transport. Please board quickly. The CEO doesn't like delays." "CEO?" She blinked. That part hadn't been mentioned. But she'd signed the NDA, submitted her translator credentials, and the instructions said private transport. She figured it would be a handful of other staff. PR, logistics, a few secretaries. What she hadn't expected was this. The jet door opened with a mechanical hiss. Inside, buttery cream leather seats, dark walnut paneling, and silence. So much silence it pressed against her ears. And one man, only one. Seated near the window, black suit perfectly tailored, wristwatch glinting with quiet arrogance, was Ha-joon Park. Amira froze mid-step. He looked up, slowly. Cold eyes landed on her like frost. "Who are you?" His voice was flat, clipped, as if even speaking to her was a waste of energy. She immediately bowed, flustered. Amira Jones, sir. I'm the translator. I was told this is a private flight. I know, I was assigned to the executive transport for Ha-joon Group, she explained quickly, her voice wobbling. They told me. Someone told me this was where I should. He shut his book, eyes narrowing. There's no one else boarding? Number I thought there would be. Ha-joon exhaled slowly, annoyance flickering across his otherwise unreadable face. They've made a mistake. I can leave, she offered, already stepping back toward the exit. I really don't mind. But the door was already closing behind her. The jet engines whirred to life. Her heart dropped. Ha-joon glanced toward the window, jaw tightening. Too late, he muttered. The cabin shook slightly as the jet taxied. Amira looked around in panic. Should I sit? Where should I? He didn't answer right away. Then, with a sigh, he gestured across from him. Sit wherever you want. Just don't talk. Oof. She swallowed her nerves and settled into the plush seat diagonally across from him, clutching her tote bag like it might save her from spontaneous combustion. The silence was unbearable. Ha-joon opened his book again. She stared out the window, then at her shoes, then at literally anything that wasn't his absurdly perfect face. This was supposed to be a quick job. Translate for a few executives. Be invisible. Get paid. Instead, she was alone on a private jet with park-freaking Ha-joon, Seoul's most emotionally unavailable billionaire, and he looked like he'd rather jump out the emergency exit than acknowledge her existence. She tapped her fingers on her knee, then stopped, then fidgeted with the strap of her bag. He didn't look up once. She leaned back slowly and muttered under her breath, God, this is going to be the longest flight of my life. Ha-joon turned a page without a word, but for a brief second, a corner of his mouth twitched. They had been in the air for maybe 3 hours. Amira had stopped fidgeting, but only because she'd retreated into silence. Her seat reclined ever so slightly, and she hugged a pillow to her chest like armor, eyes glued to the window. Ha-joon hadn't spoken since takeoff. His book was now resting on the armrest, unread. He hadn't turned a page in nearly an hour. Then the plane jolted. Just a little bump. Nothing dangerous. But it was enough to send Amira's water glass trembling, and her entire body jerked upright like she'd been electrocuted. Ha-joon's head turned sharply. She clutched the armrest, breathing unevenly. You okay? His voice was quieter than before. Amira laughed once, a small, nervous puff of air. Yeah, fine. I just really hate turbulence. You don't fly often? I do. Still hate it. She paused. And private jets feel lighter, like they'll just blow away. Ha-joon raised a brow. They don't. That's what people say right before something goes wrong in movies, she muttered, mostly to herself. Ha-joon actually set his book aside, then stood, walked to the minibar, and returned with 2 glasses. One had a golden liquid, the other, sparkling water. He offered her both. I don't know which you prefer, he said simply. Amira hesitated, then took the water. Thanks. He returned to his seat but didn't pick the book back up. You travel often? She asked cautiously, sipping. Ha-joon nodded. Too often. Must be nice. All this space to yourself. Silence. No crying babies or snoring businessmen. It's not always nice. He looked at her. Sometimes, silence just reminds you how alone you are. That shut her up. For a few seconds, neither of them said anything. Then Ha-joon, almost as if it surprised even him, asked, Why Korea? You could have worked anywhere. Why come here? Amira hesitated. I studied Korean in college, ended up falling in love with the language, then the culture, Then the food, the dramas. I don't know. I just wanted to feel connected to something. Do you? She smiled tightly. Not really. Ha-joon tilted his head. Why not? Amira looked down at her lap. Her fingers twisted the edge of her blanket, voice soft. Because no matter how fluent I get, how polite I am, how well I do my job, I'll never really belong here. People stare. Sometimes they whisper. Sometimes they smile to my face and mock me behind my back. I'm not the right kind of foreigner, not light-skinned, not skinny, not beautiful in the way everyone here expects women to be. I'm just me, and that's not enough. Ha-joon didn't interrupt, not even when her voice wavered. She looked away quickly. Sorry, that was a lot. He stared at her for a long moment, then said quietly, You're wrong. Amira blinked. What? You said you're not beautiful the way people expect. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on knees. But you're beautiful in a way that's real. People here, they confuse thinness with elegance, silence with grace. But you don't hide behind anything. You speak with meaning. You hold yourself like you're not trying to be anyone else. That's rare. Amira stared at him, stunned. Besides, he added, you're wrong about one more thing. What? You belong here, at least on this plane, right now. Her throat tightened. She looked away, flustered. You're surprisingly poetic for someone who hasn't smiled in 3 hours. 4, he corrected, lips twitching. They shared a smile, a real one. Later, a soft chime sounded, and the attendant emerged to offer them dinner. Amira expected to eat alone, but Ha-joon gestured toward the dining area. Come, he said simply. It's better than sitting apart like we're enemies. They sat across from each other again, but this time the tension had shifted. They ate slowly, savoring each bite, talked, laughed. Well, Amira laughed. Ha-joon's version was a smirk with warmth hiding behind it. He listened. She opened up more, and for the first time he found himself leaning in. Not because of her body, not because of her background, but because she saw him, not the CEO, not the name, just him. As the plane sailed quietly over the Pacific, 2 strangers, one quietly breaking apart, the other quietly holding herself together, found an unexpected stillness, and for the first time, neither of them felt alone. Somewhere over the ocean, the cabin lights dimmed to a gentle glow. Dinner trays had been cleared. Conversation had quieted. Amira now sat curled near the window, legs tucked underneath her, half asleep with her cheek resting on a pillow. Ha-joon, across from her, had stopped pretending to read. He watched her instead. Her breathing had slowed. The curve of her shoulders, the way her lips parted just slightly in sleep. It was all soft, unfiltered, human. No defenses, no awkward smiles, no fear of being seen. Just Amira. And for reasons he couldn't explain, it left him a little breathless. He stood, moved quietly to the seat beside her, and, without thinking, draped his jacket over her shoulders. She stirred at the touch but didn't wake, only leaned slightly toward the warmth. He sat beside her now, no longer across. A ridiculous, quiet line had been crossed, and he didn't care. Not anymore. 20 minutes passed, maybe 30. Ha-joon wasn't sure. Then, her eyes blinked open. She startled when she saw him sitting beside her, then looked down and noticed the jacket wrapped over her. Did you? He nodded once. Oh. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. Thanks. Ha-joon looked at her for a long moment. Then, almost too softly to hear, do you always shrink yourself like this, just to make space for people who don't deserve it? The words hit like a gust of wind. Amira froze. Her breath caught in her throat, and she turned her gaze out the window, blinking fast. He didn't push, didn't ask her to answer, but something about the way he asked, like he already knew, cut straight through her. Her voice, when it came, cracked slightly. It's easier to make space than to take it. You get hurt less that way. Ha-joon's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. You don't need to make yourself small around me, he said quietly. Amira finally looked at him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Their eyes met, and it was like the air between them had thickened. Gentle, warm, electric. Their hands rested near each other on the seat between them. A small shift, a twitch of fingers, a breath too close. Then their hands brushed. Not a grab, not a dramatic hold, just a passing touch. But neither of them moved away. Ha-joon exhaled slowly. This wasn't supposed to happen, he said, almost to himself. Amira tilted her head. What wasn't? Me seeing you. The cabin hummed softly around them. Amira didn't say a word, but she didn't pull away either. Instead, she leaned just a little closer, barely enough to be noticed. But Ha-joon noticed, and for the first time in years, he let himself feel it. The city lights glittered far below, blurred through thin clouds and descending altitude. The seatbelt sign blinked on with a soft chime. Ha-joon hadn't moved from beside her since their hands brushed. Neither of them had spoken much since. There was no need. The silence had shifted, no longer heavy, but full, charged with something unspoken, something real. Ha-joon leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees, eyes focused ahead, but his hand was still close to hers. Amira sat quietly, her fingers wrapped tightly around the edges of his jacket, draped over her like a borrowed memory. Then Ha-joon's phone buzzed. He pulled it out without thinking, glanced at the caller ID, and sighed before answering. Yes? A pause. His voice dropped serious. Tomorrow? Another pause. I told you I would announce it when I was ready. A quiet breath. I understand. Just handle it. He hung up. Amira's body had gone still. He turned, slowly, only to find her staring out the window, her posture straight, shoulders tight. The jacket slid down her arm slightly, but she didn't adjust it. Amira, he said. She didn't look at him. You heard. A beat of silence. Her voice came out flat. Engagement announcement. Tomorrow. Ha-joon opened his mouth, closed it. What was he supposed to say? It's just for business? It doesn't mean anything? But even he wasn't sure if that was the truth anymore. So he said nothing. And that said everything. Amira shifted slightly away, her hands gathering his jacket and folding it neatly onto the seat beside her. She didn't meet his eyes as she whispered, "Thank you for the flight." It felt like a slap dressed as politeness. The plane touched down minutes later, smooth, controlled, cold, like him. At the terminal, the door opened with a sharp hiss. The stairs rolled into place. Ha-joon turned to say something. Anything. But Amira was already walking ahead. No goodbye, no lingering look, just the soft click of her shoes against the floor as she disappeared into the terminal's gray morning light. He watched her go, did nothing to stop her, but inside, something crumbled. And for the first time in years, Park Ha-joon didn't feel in control. He just felt empty. The photos hit the internet the next day, clean, polished, and painfully hollow. Ha-joon stood beside his fiancée, the daughter of a powerful chaebol dynasty, with a pressed smile that didn't reach his eyes. Cameras flashed. People applauded. The news headlines were full of phrases like power couple and perfect match. He barely heard any of it. All he could hear was his conversation with Amira. You don't need to make yourself small around me. Do you always shrink yourself like this, just to make space for people who don't deserve it? Thank you for the flight. Her last words echoed like a knife's whisper. That night, Ha-joon sat alone in his penthouse apartment, tie loosened, drink untouched, staring out over Seoul like it had betrayed him. The empty glass reflected his reflection back at him, but all he saw was a man who'd let something real walk away. He couldn't sleep, couldn't think. He had everything: the deal, the merger, the image, and none of it meant anything. Because for the first time in his life, someone had seen him not as a title or a suit or a last name, but just Ha-joon, and he let her go. Meanwhile, Amira shut her laptop after another round of job applications. London, Toronto, anywhere. She didn't cry. She was past that. Now it was just a dull ache that followed her everywhere, especially when her phone lit up with another article about Ha-joon's engagement. She didn't read them. She didn't need to. She'd already convinced herself what she was to him. A moment of warmth before he went back to his real life. Don't get attached, she muttered to herself, staring at the ceiling. Lesson learned. Ha-joon was 2 seconds from losing his mind. Every meeting dragged. Every dinner with his fiancée felt like static. He barely heard what she said anymore. Not because she wasn't beautiful or intelligent, but because she didn't ask him real questions. She didn't see him. He thought about Amira's nervous laugh, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about language, the curve of her shoulders when she thought no one was watching. He missed her. He missed her so badly it burned. He snapped 2 days later. Right in the middle of a brunch meeting with both families, investors watching, wine glasses clinking. Ha-joon stood. Everyone paused. I'm calling it off. A long silence fell. His mother blinked, stunned. His fiancé's father leaned forward, eyes dark. You're calling off the engagement? Someone repeated. Ha-joon nodded, steady. Yes. Do you realize what you're giving up? He looked around the room, then down at his untouched food. Then he said softly, everything that matters to you, and walked out. Hours later, the news exploded. The merger was on hold. Stocks dipped. Gossip swirled. But Ha-joon didn't care. For once, he wasn't chasing legacy or control. He was chasing her. The woman who didn't care about his last name. The one who looked at him like he was just a man. And maybe, if he wasn't too late, he could prove to her he was more than a moment in the sky. The airport buzzed with its usual rhythm, flight announcements echoing overhead, rolling suitcases clattering across polished floors, goodbyes and reunions blending into background noise. Amira stood near the international departures gate, boarding pass in one hand, her heart in the other. Her suitcase sat quietly by her feet. This was it. She'd booked the flight last night, told no one, just packed and ran. Maybe she wasn't running from him. Maybe she was just running toward a version of herself that didn't ache every time his name was mentioned. She adjusted her hoodie, tugging the sleeves down over her palms. This is the right choice, she whispered to herself. Let it go. Let him go. Then, a voice behind her. Amira. Her breath caught. She turned slowly, like a dream she was too scared to wake from. And there he was, Ha-joon, breathless, no jacket, hair slightly tousled like he'd run through traffic to get there. What are you doing here? She asked, voice already trembling. He walked toward her, not fast, not dramatic, but with purpose, with the weight of everything he should have said days ago. He stopped right in front of her, looked her in the eyes. You told me I wasn't cold, he said. That maybe I was just lonely. Her eyes shimmered, wide and uncertain. You were right, Ha-joon continued, but now I'm not lonely anymore, because I found you. Amira's breath hitched. She blinked rapidly, the tears coming faster than she could stop them. You can't just say that now, she whispered, shaking her head. You're supposed to be engaged. Your whole life is... I called it off, he said simply. Silence, thick, alive. I risked everything for one reason, he murmured, stepping closer. Because you're the only person who's ever seen me. The only one I wanted to be seen by. Amira covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. Stop. You're gonna make me... She didn't finish the sentence. She couldn't. He stepped even closer, gently pulling her hand away from her face. You're beautiful, he said. Not just to me. Just... period. You are. She sobbed. Not loud, not dramatic. Just raw and real and full. She nodded slowly, like her heart finally understood something her head never could. I never thought someone like you could want someone like me. He gave her the softest smile she'd ever seen on him. Then let me prove it. Every day. For as long as you'll let me. And then, without hesitation, he kissed her, right there, in the middle of the airport, surrounded by strangers and flight calls and chaos. Software, longing, like he'd been holding his breath since she left and was finally allowed to breathe again. Amira melted into him, into the moment, into finally being seen. And in that kiss, she didn't feel like a girl who was too much or not enough. She just felt like Amira. And that was finally enough. Ha-joon invites Amira to a family dinner. She dresses carefully, classy, minimal makeup, a long black dress that fits just right. But the moment she walks in, she feels the chill. Ha-joon's mother barely glances at her. His aunt mutters something under her breath in Korean. His older cousin gives her a once-over that feels like a full-body scan. Amira doesn't miss it. She sits through the meal, quiet and composed, but she can't eat much. The judgment is thick in the air. So you're American? His mother asks with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. Yes, ma'am. Born and raised in Georgia. Interesting. And you're in translation, correct? Not business? Amira just nods, smiles politely, pretends not to hear the undertone. Later, in the car, Ha-joon is fuming. You don't ever have to see them again. I mean it. But Amira just laughs softly and looks out the window. It's okay. I felt like this before. I know what it's like to walk into a room and know no one thinks you belong there. They're wrong, he says. You belong with me. I know. She smiles, finally meeting his gaze. But it's nice to hear you say it. The media goes wild once the relationship goes public. Hansong, CEO and romance scandal. Who is this woman? From Curvy translator to Billionaire's girlfriend. How did she pull it off? Fans shocked by Ha-joon's non-traditional choice. The comments are worse. Ha-joon sees the headlines before she does. When Amira finally reads them, her hands shake. So this is how they see me, she whispers, scrolling through hate disguised as curiosity. Like I don't deserve you. Like I tricked you into this. Ha-joon takes the phone from her and tosses it on the couch. Then he kneels in front of her, gently holding her hands. You didn't trick me, Amira. You saved me. But they all think... Let them think. They've never known me. You do. He kisses the back of her hand, softly. You're not what they expected. You're better. You really mean that? I've never meant anything more in my life. On a night when it all becomes too much, Amira breaks. She hides in the bathroom, crouched behind the door, silently crying into her knees. Her insecurities spiral. Why me? Why now? Why did he pick me? Ha-joon doesn't knock. He just opens the door quietly and finds her there. Sits on the floor beside her, wraps her in his arms without a word. I'm trying to be strong, she whispers into his chest. I'm trying to be enough. You already are. But, no, listen to me. He gently tilts her chin up. You're enough. Even when you're crying, even when you're scared, even when the whole world doubts you. I won't. He kisses her forehead, stays on the bathroom floor with her for hours, until she falls asleep in his arms. The next time reporters ask Ha-joon about his relationship, they expect a PR-safe answer. Instead, he looks straight at the cameras and says, if anyone's wondering how someone like me fell in love with someone like Amira Jones, the real question is, how did I get lucky enough for her to say yes? Dead silence. Then chaos. But Ha-joon doesn't flinch. And somewhere at home, watching the live broadcast, Amira bursts into tears with a laugh in her throat. It starts small. One morning, Amira wakes up in Ha-joon's apartment to the soft sound of jazz playing in the background, the scent of blueberry pancakes and caramel coffee drifting through the air. She blinks sleepily, still curled in his t-shirt, and slowly shuffles out of bed barefoot. In the kitchen, Ha-joon is standing at the stove in sweats and a black tea, plating pancakes with fresh fruit like he's competing on a cooking show. You're awake, he says, without looking. Sit. It's almost done. She raises an eyebrow. Since when do you cook? Since I realized you skip breakfast when I'm not around. He says it so casually, like he didn't just track her habits and make her a custom breakfast. She smiles, heart softening. You really made pancakes? 2 kinds, blueberry and chocolate chip. I didn't know which one you were in the mood for. Later, Ha-joon insists on driving her to work himself. He opens the car door for her like they're in a drama, hand resting on her lower back protectively the entire way. You don't have to do all this, she says, sinking into the leather seat. You're busy. I can take the train. I want to. Ha-joon, you have meetings. Rescheduled. You rescheduled your CEO meetings to drive me across the city? He looks over at her with a slight smirk. You're the only meeting I care about today. When she gets to work, her desk is filled with a small but elegant bouquet. Not roses, but her favorite flowers, white peonies and soft lavender. No card, she knows it's him. That night, she comes home to a surprise. Candles lit, soft music, a stack of new books she mentioned once in passing, a robe in her favorite color, a silk bonnet because you said you lost yours at the hotel. He even bought her satin pillowcases, matching, because I Googled it. Your hair deserves the best, he said. Later, when they're curled up on the couch, her head on his chest and his fingers tracing slow circles on her back, she finally asks, why do you do all this for me? Ha-joon pauses, then answers simply, because no one ever took care of you the way you deserve. And you think you can? No. He kisses her forehead. I know I can. 6 months later. The sky was blushing lavender as the sun dipped behind the Han River. The private rooftop of Hansong Tower had been transformed into a candlelit garden, soft music playing, string lights glowing like stars in the air. Amira stood in the center of it all, wrapped in a deep green silk gown, curls pinned up with tiny pearls, the city stretching out behind her like a dream she never asked for, but somehow ended up living in. Ha-joon stood beside her, hand in hers, looking nothing like the cold CEO. He looked soft, unburdened, happy. Across from them sat his family. Yes, his family. It hadn't happened overnight. It took months of tension, side glances, long silences. But Ha-joon had been relentless, not in anger, but in patience. He didn't argue. He didn't demand. He simply loved Amira out loud, in full view, unapologetically. And eventually, something shifted. His mother began calling her by name. His aunt complimented her cooking. His cousin asked for help on a speech she had to give in English. Now, 6 months later, Ha-joon's mother was the one who stood to raise a toast. "When I first met Amira," she said, voice calm, "I didn't know what to expect. I only saw what I thought I knew." She glanced at her son, then at Amira. But Ha-joon has changed, not for worse, for better. He's lighter, happier, and that kind of change only comes from real love. She smiled genuinely. "I was wrong, and I am grateful to be wrong." Tears pooled in Amira's eyes. Ha-joon gently squeezed her hand. Later that night, after the speeches and laughter, when the rooftop had cleared out and only the stars remained, Amira stood wrapped in Ha-joon's jacket, staring at the city lights below. He came up behind her, arms slipping around her waist. "You okay?" he murmured into her ear. She nodded, eyes misty. "Your mom hugged me," she whispered, still stunned. "I saw it. She said she was proud of me." "She should be," he said, smiling. She turned to face him. "I still can't believe this is my life." Ha-joon leaned down, touching his forehead to hers. "Believe it, because I'm never letting you go." He kissed her slow, tender, like they had all the time in the world. And this time, Amira didn't question if she was beautiful. She didn't wonder if she was enough. She knew, because she was loved, truly, deeply, publicly, and without conditions. Somewhere above them, a plane flew across the sky, 30,000 feet in the air, where everything had begun. The end.